welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I'm your host, Jessica, and I am here with two authors who wrote a thrilling, spicy book called Strike and Burn that I think a lot of people are going to be talking about. Why don't you please introduce yourselves and let's talk about this book.
Hooray! All right.
You want to go first, Adele?
All right, I'll go first. My name is Adele Griffin. I am recently moved to Los Angeles from my whole grown-up life in Brooklyn, New York. When I came out here, I became neighbors with Julie Buxbaum. I'm a writer. I've written many different kinds of books, like chapter books for younger audiences, for kids, middle grade series books, an adult book, but never had I written a romance before.
Adele's being modest. She's also a National Book Award finalist twice. Not once, but twice. Do you want me to show you? Is it my turn now?
Yeah, go.
Okay.
Go.
I'm Julie Buxbaum. I am one half of Taylor Hutton. Before writing Strike and Burn, though, I have written, I think, 12 novels. Or maybe 11. I have to do the math. But like Adele, it was in totally different genres. I've written adult fiction, like contemporary women's fiction. I've written young adult and middle grade. But this is my first foray into romantic suspense.
And Julie is also being really modest because I happen to know she is a New York Times bestselling author, and her books have traveled the world, have been translated into a bazillion different languages. I want to say 40.
No, not 40, but yeah.
Close.
All right, let's talk about Strike and Burn, which is, man, I don't know how much I can say about this book. It was just a really fast read. And like any book that starts off the way where like the main protagonist, she's in a morgue, she's grieving her family. And then like she meets this guy who's like intriguing and becomes the other half of the story. I really just didn't know what I was in for, but that was one of the craziest entries into a book that I've ever read. So it's funny because having been a children's librarian for 15 years, like I'd seen your names on other books, and it's exciting to see you both writing together and doing this. So how did you all both begin to write this book together, and where did that opening scene just sort of come from for both of you?
I'm so glad that you described the book exactly as we hope readers experience it, because we very much want it to feel like a ride. I think this book was an accidental project for both of us. We are neighbors and friends and get together quite often to talk books and writing and write together often. And when I say write together often, I mean write separately, but in the same space. And one day Adele and I got to talking about romance. We had both been reading a ton of romance, and started brainstorming ideas. I don't think either one of us actually believed we would write the book, though, when we first sat down to start talking about it.
We had been reading a lot of we've been reading a lot of the Colleen Hoover. Yeah. This is when that big story broke on Colleen Hoover, and she was giving a lot more detail to the world about sort of her story and her journey. And it was really fascinating to us as writers. And so we were talking about it, and we had read Verity. And then Julie reads more. I should say, yes, we both read, but Julie reads a lot more across a lot of different like subcategories of romance. And so she was like, oh, you've got to read this one, you've got to read that one. And I was reading them. And then I think from that conversation, which was sort of ongoing, we'd see each other again, we'd pick up this conversation about, the wildness of Verity, and that we wanted to do our own thing, but to hold on to some of what we felt in that story, which was a kind of a no unfiltered, exuberant, like electric fun she was having writing that. And we wanted to connect with that. And we were connecting with it in a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think we also really just wanted to turn the volume up to 11. We sort of had a rule when writing that there was no such thing as too far. That being said, we did, cut things back and sort of roll ourselves back here and there, which is hard to imagine when you read the book. We might have gone even further. But that we sort of wanted to write unfettered for the first time. And one fun thing about writing this book is so we started on a Google Doc.
That's right.
And we had the rule that you could only write for 1 hour a day and only if it was fun. It was never supposed to feel like work. And we started doing that and just passing this Google Doc back and forth. And we just log in when we felt like it. And all of a sudden we had like half a book.
Yep.
And I think we had this conversation. We met in person and had a conversation about like, wait a second, we actually have a book here. Are we doing this? And then we both decided we were in and then we went for it. But I think from to answer your original question, I think from the very beginning, we knew this was going to be a meet cute in the morgue. Because like, what a fun setup to set yourselves up to write a serious thriller with a meet cute in the morgue.
I think it was definitely wild, and everything about it was wild. So you have your two main characters, Honor Stone, which is such a great name, by the way. Such a great name. And Strike Madden, who is, I don't even know like how to describe him. He's a wealthy owner of this tech company, but it's like a VR company that it's like VR hentai, which for those who actually, why don't you describe what it is? Because being an anime person myself and having grown up with it, I was like, oh, okay. But you do describe for people who are not aware of what that term means and how it relates to Strike's business. Explain a little bit about what he does, because Honor, we know that she's mourning her sister. You find out very quickly that she and her sister are orphans. They had a really traumatic upbringing, and they owned this really sweet little store together called Grace and Honor, I believe. Yeah. And it's like it's almost like your classic like tchotchke store, except it has a twist, but we can get to that later. But Strike finds her, is the one who meets her in the morgue, and then finds out that she's an artist and automatically wants to recruit her to his company. So like, yeah, like how would you describe the company that Strike owns?
You want to take this one down? You want me to take it?
For what I'm a mom of a teenage son who wants to go to school for anime. So I think, and he has not, by the way, read this book. But he's 7, so I'm not sure, in terms of like all that you would need to get to this place in your career is really all that she has. It was like we do make that creative leap. But the idea for us, I think, organically, was that we really wanted this female first, that she was an artist who was expressing a lot of kind of feelings of being empowered sexually, that it was sort of coming out in the art, if not so much in her life, that she was using something that she felt really good about, kind of like as a way to become all that she could become. Like it was sort of part of her arc. And we didn't want the company to be, this bro, filled, stocked with men's fantasies kind of organization. We wanted her to sort of create the space, own the space. He was giving her free reign to do that. And we went right into that idea that she was like, with all of this creative license, obviously he's so like captivated by her that she can just kind of get in there and create first through art her fantasies. And so I think that was how we saw her enjoying this job that she might otherwise have felt like, I'm totally unqualified for this job, and kind of getting past that he would that he would allow that, because he also wanted to know where she was going to go with this idea of building out the sort of feminist hentai aspect of VR.
I mean, I think we wanted to explore the possibilities of feminism in romance and turn what could have been just a gross bro empire, sort of what you were saying, into something that was women focused and women first. And he needed a woman to figure that piece out. And so that's where Honor steps in. And it provides an opportunity for her also to sort of explore her own sexuality and her sexuality in art. And so that's sort of where it came from. The hentai piece was a learning experience for both of us. And we found it's a world that is very male dominated, and
It is. It absolutely is. And like as somebody who grew up, watching anime, and it was much, the access to it was a lot more difficult when I was a kid. So sometimes you would pick something up and you wouldn't know what you were picking up, and then you'd be like, oh, okay.
and
Yeah.
I thought it'd be fun, or we thought it would be fun to sort of flip it on its head from what is a traditionally male empire and infuse it with, feminism.
So Honor is so she's, you get little snippets of her background from time to time, and her sister, she's obviously mourning, but she's very much aware that the death itself does not seem as accidental as it was said to be, and she's not getting anywhere with law enforcement, which kind of brings her and Strike together in another way, because he's also got his own kind of side hustle going on. Without giving a little too much away, their stories, did you write them separately? Like, did one of you write as Strike and the other one write as Honor, or did you like kind of write the two characters together?
We wrote the two characters together in a very linear fashion, and then went back and sort of filled in detail. Because when we first started writing, I think it was a little bit more obvious who wrote which piece.
And it was all Honor. Like, we went back on a pass and decided to add Strike
Later, yeah.
later in. So I think that, and that was probably a good idea for us, because we were both having to create this character. So in some ways we had to like fuse and have like a good deep understanding of this one voice that we were writing in, and really have a good deep understanding of Strike before we realized, you know what, let's hear from Strike. And so we started to change some of the chapters and create his point of view out of scenes that we had already written. And we really liked hearing from him. So then it became, I think
Natural.
it was
Really natural.
It was natural. It was like certainly the long way, but we liked it. We were like, no, we like this.
We're currently finishing up the next book in the series. And in that one, we have 2 points of view as well. And I guess we could have assigned each, and that book is more of a two-hander. It's more 50-50. And I think we probably could have assigned each of us a voice, but so far we haven't done it that way. We just been writing linearly together. What has been interesting about what's been happening though, writing together, is at first our voices felt distinct, and we sort of, you could feel it a little bit jarringly when we would read our first pass. And now we figured out the Taylor Hutton voice versus Julie's voice and Adele's voice.
Yeah, that's true.
And now when we look back, we have no idea who wrote what.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Which I feel like is a mark of us finally finding our voice together.
Yes.
I was actually going to ask you if this is going to be part of a series. Yeah.
Yep. So
yeah.
it's a companion book, I would say, right? It's not a sequel, it's a companion. So 2 characters who are in Strike and Burn get their own love story and their own adventure.
Excellent. Very cool. What about like all the spicy aspects of it? Like, was that, because the heat is definitely up. Was that difficult to kind of get into being that this is different in the past than other things?
A funny story. Adele and I had an interview, like a on paper interview recently. And Adele answered the questions first and then sent it over to me. And she snuck in there in this interview that I had taken the lead on all the spicy scenes. I would like to say here and now, that is not true. We both worked on the spicy scenes.
I feel like
we just blocked out the experience of
yeah, maybe
scenes.
I did like the thing where you move your eyeballs so that you forget. I also have a funny story where we had a certain, this was when we were trying to figure out a certain, they come together, when Strike and Honor come together, and they are in a morgue, and we could not decide which way to play it.
Oh yes, and I did take the lead on that. I will admit to taking the lead on it.
Right. Julie would be like, okay, now it's this.
I rewrote, there's a particularly sensual scene in the morgue, which is obviously a very difficult thing to write and keep sexy because there are dead bodies in the morgue.
Worked on that thing forever.
And that is not, and to be clear, that is neither of our thing. It's not like we're not into it, that was not adding to the sex.
That's the problem with it, because we were like, this might be, because you know, Taylor Hutton is younger. Like I always feel like we are writing in this voice of somebody who does actually find all of this, like really believes in this. Like I feel like whoever Taylor Hutton is that we've created, she like loves this stuff. But I sometimes feel like this is not my stuff. And so Julie and I,
sex in the morgue.
no, the morgue is really a really hard one. We kept trying.
So I tried. I sent Adele maybe 5 different versions of that scene with many different sexual scenarios, put it that way.
I still don't like it.
And it took that was probably the hardest scene to write.
But it was
funny.
But
generally, I don't think the spicy scenes were hard. They were really fun.
It's just book more fun.
Yes, really fun. There was one time when, I don't know if you remember this, when we were in your kitchen and we were trying to like figure out the physicality and you made me stand up. Literally like fully dressed, obviously blocked out how the
your foot.
Like, is it possible for me to put my foot on your shoulder? That sort of thing. We had fun with it, to be honest. It was just a blast from beginning to end.
Where did the name Taylor Hutton come from?
It's a good question.
Ooh. Well, we dedicate the book to Sarah Milanowski, and she was very interested in sort of, and she has been, like interested in the creation of Taylor Hutton, like what that looks like in the
real
bookstore in the real world. And I think, we
went through a few names.
Yeah.
We started with sort of more personal names that reflected like Adele's street name and cute things like that.
Yeah.
And they were they sounded a little prissy, I feel like.
Yeah, they sounded like British-y street names.
And we really thought about who we wanted Taylor Hutton to sound like. And somehow it was, Taylor Swift was on tour. It was the Eras tour time. And so Taylor stuck. And then Taylor Hutton had a little heft to it. And just somehow one day we were sitting down and we came up with it and it really felt right.
Yeah.
And to me, Taylor Hutton feels like this other entity.
Yes. We landed on it. We were like, there, she always existed. We just found her name.
And now she exists. Like she actually exists as something separate to us in our minds.
For sure.
Well, again, it was a lot of fun. I have to say, I really liked it. I really liked just kind of how you let us on and let us in a little bit more and more to Grace's backstory, where you learned more about who she was, Honor's backstory, where you let us in a little bit more to Honor and Grace's backstory. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but they were identical twins.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and they had a younger brother, and just sort of like where all of that came from and just kind of where her headspace was at, because that was like, while the story itself was a wild ride and it really was like, a quick burn, it was like a slow burn learning, just that background. And I thought that was a really sort of nice balance.
Adele and I spent a lot of time discussing this concept of using romance to process trauma. And I think it was Adele who came up with this sort of term traumantasy, where we read a ton of books where people find escape reading about truly terrible things paired with beautiful romance, which seemed like two things that don't naturally go together. But when you read these books, they really do. And our hope is it provides, an opportunity for people to process and find an escape from their own trauma by reading about someone else surviving.
Julie anchored a lot of the some of the backstory when you go back, and I remember having this moment of reading it, like within all of the fun and all of the stuff, I found the backstory to be like quite poignant, actually. Like there is, I think, I did feel, I know Julie well, but I did feel like the feeling of like, oh, this is like good, this is real good fiction storytelling, and it's sort of the piece of it that is not, all of the wild stuff that's happening in Honor's life, but I do think that it's like a very full invitation into her history that makes the story a little bit different that way, that you can really feel that she's pretty humanized. Like we were very interested in Honor.
I also think one of the most fun things of writing is finding those balances. With my other fiction, Adele does this too. I love finding the funny in the darkest moments of life and writing those stories and finding those two to balance together in a story. In this, instead of doing funny dark moments in life, it was light adventure romp almost.
Yeah.
Paired with these real dark, serious themes, and sort of finding that balance where you give this reader the ride that we promise, while at the same time providing, true backstory and layers and complication.
Well, it was a really fun read. I'm really excited to see where you all go next with it. So I have to ask, what do you guys like to read? Like, what are you reading right now? Is there any recommendations you have?
I have been reading a ton of romance, which is my coping strategy. And the world has sort of been a tough place lately. And so I have really been burying my head in romance. I have a real love for enemies to lovers. And so that's where I am right now. I'm reading Alicia Thompson for the first time. And I'm reading I read one of her books earlier, like a week ago, and now I'm on to her second because her backlist has been fun.
This past month, I was doing lots of cozy mysteries. I did Everyone This Christmas Has a Secret, and then went back. I had never even heard of that author. That was great. And now I'm in the middle of Sharp Objects, which is less cozy, but that's where I go in a little bit of I don't know, my December. Somehow I like to read more crime and thrillers, and then I have it becomes a phase, and then I'll forget about them and go off and read something else. But now I'm like fully immersed in trying to read mysteries, crimes, and thrillers.
Did you read The Most Wonderful Crime of the Year?
What's that?
It's Allie Carter's book.
I love Allie Carter.
It's really fun. It's an adult.
Is that new?
It's an adult cozy mystery Christmas romp.
Oh my God.
So it was perfect.
That's what I need.
For her a few weeks ago. I don't know. It might be too.
I might be back. Yeah.
But it's a delight.
Well, thank you so much. This was great. So once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guests were
Julie Buxbaum,
Adele Griffin,
who are Taylor Hutton together.
Yes. And when can we find this book? When will it be available?
January 28th.
Yep. Which is, I think, approximately 10 days. No.
That's pretty soon.
It's very soon.
It's happening.
In a bookstore near you.
2 weeks.
All right. Or a library.
Or a library.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.